Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to the iConis podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Barry 3D, and on today's episode, we're just going to answer one simple question. And that question is, why? Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in. Remember, like, subscribe, and share. Don't let the channel be a secret. And remember, this template now was done with Jaybird Digital Arts. Thank you once again. So at the beginning of this show, I asked a question, and the question is why? Why? So seeing it's Black History Month, we're going to get into why does this show exist? Why do I do the channel that I do? Why do I have Rod with me? And all of that. Just give you some little bit of insight of the show. Sometimes it's fun to find out behind the scenes. I'm not sure if a lot of other creators do so, but I think it'd be nice to kind of get that personal touch. So pretty much, why iConis podcast? Well, very simple. Back when COVID came around, and even before then, me and Rod were doing one podcast. We called it Out the Box Fancast, and it's very much same concept of what we're doing now. Of course, we stopped for a while, and life happens, and we took and put it on pause on that, just kind of get back on track with life. And then COVID came around, and I turned around and said, well, I want to get back to it. Of course, when COVID started, everyone was kind of stuck at home, had to do everything from home, so I figured it was a good time to kind of jump back into the channel and get the channel going. So we gave the channel a rebrand. We gave it a little bit of a different polish to it, and we jumped right back into it. So why do I do the show, or why I'm so, passionate about the show? And it's very simple. I do the show to connect with friends. I do the show to connect with new people. I do the show to give myself an outlet to talk about my passion for comic books and anything related in this realm. And Rod is just along there with me. So growing up, me and Rod have we're cousins. That's a true fact there. Our dads are, brothers. We are extremely close, me and Rod. We grew up pretty much together, not too far away from each other, just minutes away from where his parents lived and my parents lived. So we'd always hang out with each other on weekends, so forth, phone calls, the whole 9 yards. And a lot of our conversations back then were always about comic books and sci-fi and Dungeons and Dragons and all of these things that we like. And keep in mind now, we're a little bit older. So back then it wasn't seen, or it wasn't as popular as it is now. It was more underground, so you didn't go through school saying, oh man, did you get the latest issue of X comic or whatever? Because people would look at you and give you a side eye, the funny look, or make name or, jokes with you. Now, for myself, I've had multiple different facets. And I think that what put it off is that as much as I'm a geek, I also had things that people saw was cool, right? And that's just my assumption. So I was into comedy from young. I did a lot of hip hop dancing competitions and so forth, and music videos that I've done over the years, and I've traveled around doing that. So I think that cool factor, outshone the nerd factor, but I didn't have it out there as much. My close friends would know about it. You've seen some of them on the show, of course, Rod, Derwin, Thomas. So, and there's more in that group, that friend group that shares that passion. So with my brother, he always got into it because I was into it. With Rod, we spoke about it. You heard me mention my buddy Kevin and Winston. Yes, these are guys that we would sit around and we would spend nights or evenings or whatever, hit comic book store on a Wednesday, get the new books, go home, read it, and then we would swap, or we would all hang out and then we would swap issues. So I would buy a particular series, one of my buddies would buy another series, and then we would swap it and we would talk about it. So this is where a lot of that passion came from, and we enjoy. So when it came around and podcasting was getting more out there, I always said I always wanted to do a podcast. Now I do stand-up comedy, but I didn't want to do a comedy podcast. I mean, there's a lot out there, and sure, there's a lot of comic book ones out there, but I save my comedy really for on stage, and I know I have to put up more videos, true, but really for the stage. So I wanted this to be another outlet for my creative side, and that's where the iConis podcast came about. We started that off. So looking at other shows, I know some do it solo, some do it with a host, and I always wanted to do this with Rod. So one, it kind of keeps me out there, creative, keeps me in a project with my cousin, so keeps us close to work on stuff, because as friends, groups, we all get older, and even though you're still close, life comes in, right? So families come in, people move different places, and you don't talk as often. So this gives me a way to talk to Rod and vice versa on a regular basis all the time. So it keeps that closeness there. We still talk about something we love and we're passionate about, which is comics, and we want to share it with everybody. For new and old, viewers and listeners. And I think it's something nice to leave behind. With YouTube and, of course, with podcast, right, when Podbean, like we were on, it gives people a chance to check us out. So what I mean by that is, let's say, who knows, 20 years in the future, don't know where it's going to be. Don't know what it's going to be, right? But I know if my daughter ever wants to say, hey, I just want to hear my dad's voice, or whatever the case would be, you know, you can just flip on a video and just say, ah, there's dad. I can flip it on and it's like, oh man, I remember when I used that. Well, I never had hair in this video, but I remember when I was younger, you know, and it just brings back good memories. So think of it as a time capsule for family members. Think of it as connection with my friends. And we still have these discussions, and it prompts that because my buddies watch it. So they'll reach out and, you know, like Sean, for example, and they'll reach out and leave comments, or we'll have our own little chats and so forth like that. So we also have a WhatsApp group. If you go check out, you know, iConis podcast on WhatsApp groups, you'll find us there, and we post stuff there. So feel free to chat with us there. So that's why I do it. Now, other part is what got me collecting. So I guess it's like a W5 kind of thing. So I always read comic books when I was younger. I always liked the art. When I was a kid, I would go and I remember buying classic comics, right? Like, you know, Shazam, Superman, Batman, of course, and your Super Friends comics. I know I would read them, but I wasn't like diving in until something clicks. I think in everyone's life, something clicks to make people say, aha, that's your aha moment. Sometimes you recognize it, sometimes you don't. And I know where my aha moment was. And you've seen me put videos on this before, and if you search around, you'll find them again. So my aha moment was back in the summer, walking down the street to the corner store from the apartments that my parents lived in. They had all the comic books, right? I wouldn't go to a comic book store per se. I would go to a corner store, or a dépanneur, as they would say in Montreal. And I would get my comic books from there. It'd be on a rack. You pick it up, pay for it, you walk out. And the comic that really struck to me was Micronauts. So, you know, by Marvel Comics, they came from inner space, Micronauts. That was, you know, I saw that cover, and I don't know why, but I can tell you it drew me in. So issue number 8 of Micronauts, with all of them on the cover, you know, Baron Causa standing over him like a giant. The rest of them are all small. I got the name Micro, means small. And I'm like, okay. And then the art by, you know, Bill Metallo, you know, Michael Golden, that team pairing. And what spoke to me even more is because back then we had a store called Consumers. So before Amazon, we had Consumers, and Consumers where you would have everything in stock. Very small storefront opening, but it would have a big warehouse. So you'd have to go to look at the catalog, write the number down on the little card of the item, right? Their item code, give it at the counter. They would go and get it back and bring it up to you. So at this time, Micronauts came out, you know, around the same time as Shogun Warriors, that whole Hasbro push. And Micronauts also had their toys. So I always found their toys really cool. Like they, you know, they're interchangeable. They came from inner space. So you saw the different versions of Time Traveler. You saw the different ones of Space Glider. So me, space and gliding. And then now we're seeing there's a comic book and a toy. So I had the blue die-cast metal version of Space Glider with an orange Time Traveler. I remember that very well. With the Orbital Racer. It was like almost like a F1 car. And then I had the comic book, and I'm like, this is great. At my age, I had the toy and the comic book, boom. Space Glider Commander ran, boom. And it just clicked for me. So that's where I got into it. And then I really got into the art. So prior to that, I was into Battle of the Planets, you know, or Gatchaman as you might know it. So I used to watch it every Saturday morning because we didn't have VCRs or beta machines. If you had a show that was on, you had to watch it. You had to, first of all, you had to get the TV guide from any store. Then you had to go through the TV guide through the week, find out what time they're coming on, and then set your alarm, get up and go and watch it. And that's how we had to do things back then. It's not like now where you can stream it and so forth. So I had to be up at, you know, 6:30 in the morning to catch Battle of the Planets. Da, 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 da. So between Battle of the Planets, Space Ghost, of course, Looney Tunes, and the cartoons go on and on and on. This is what got me to do it. And that's really what brought me more into it. So I used to like drawing as a kid, and I would draw a lot of stuff. Speed Buggy, you know, classic Batman 66, so to speak, with Adam West, Burt Ward. And then you'd see the toys come out. And then, of course, nobody's rich. So you make do with what you make do with. So what I used to do is I would get the toy figures. So I'd have my Batman and Robin Kenner toy figures. And then I would make my own Batcave. I would go at a cardboard, I'd get the cardboard. My mom would come home with these cardboard sheets, and I'd get my pencil crayons and I would cut it out. I'd get a brown paper bag and make the outside of the Batcave and make my own little interior of the Batcave. And so I made my own dioramas back then without even realizing that's what I was doing. I made my own play sets. So I was always drawn into the art, the creativity, and then the stories. And at that time when I read Micronauts, I was all in. I wanted to know everything about them. And keep in mind, I get my allowance at the time would be like $5 at the time for my parents once a week. But now, $5 today doesn't go far, but $5 back then, shoot, Micronauts, it was 35 cents an issue. So with $5, I can go pretty far with that on a weekly basis. And I had to understand, when new comics got released, I went there every day, week to the corner store. Hey, when's the new one coming out? And the guy had explained, hey, they only come out once a month. Oh, okay, I gotta wait a whole month. Oh. So that's why I've gotten into comic books and other things. What else do I like? Well, you probably heard me mention it on the show. Of course, I like comic books, and I don't care if it's Marvel, I don't care if it's DC, I don't have one over the other. I like them all. Independents, the underground ones, the more serious ones, the jokey ones. If the art catches my eye and then the story is good, I'm all in. And I go from very maybe traditional art to very abstract style of art. So I'm that kind of easy critic, and because of that, I read a lot of stuff, and I own a lot of stuff in my own personal collection. So I just don't stay in one lane, even though at times in the show we might seem to kind of lean one side more than the other, but that's totally unintentional. So, this is where I come in. So I have comic books, as I mentioned, of course, video games. I remember I had not even the Atari, I had the knockoff version of the Atari when it first came out, and my favorite game was Berserk. And then at one point, of course, years later, I've upgraded. I worked a part-time job, and the first thing I bought was a Commodore 64 with a floppy disk drive. And my favorite game on there was Jumpman, Bruce Lee, Yar Kung Fu. And I got more into those type of games. So gaming was another huge thing for me. And even just a tad before that was Dungeons and Dragons. I remember a couple of my buddies turned around and they got the box set, right? The Dungeons and Dragons basic set, where you had very limited character classes. So you had a fighter, a thief, a magic user, and an elf. So the race elf was not even a race. It was also a class where the elf was, I guess, a multi-class between a fighter, a thief, and a thief, and a magic user, because it had attributes from all those. So those were the cool ones to play. And started off that, and we would do that once a week on Saturdays, after watching Mystery Theater, like 3000, I think it was, and we would start that or one of those shows, and then we would do that every Saturday and play for hours on end. These things stretched my imagination and really made me think. I would draw, I would think, I would write my own stories, I would read the stories, I would see what I liked, what I didn't like, and say, okay. And then, of course, my head was in the clouds. I was all into the NASA space race as a young kid, the whole idea of going to the moon, going back there to the moon, the Skylab space station. I thought that was totally amazing. I was into Space 1999 and Buck Rogers and all that stuff. So science fiction was also huge for me. Now, science fiction today, as opposed to science fiction back then, we had Thunderbirds, but keep in mind, by the time we got Space 1999, oh geez, that was cutting graphics. By the time that we turned around and got live action shows. So when they did the live action 1977 Spider-Man, we look back at it now, we giggle and laugh, but at the time that was cutting edge. That was the best we were going to get at that time. Same thing with Lou Ferrigno and the Incredible Hulk, right? With Bill Bixby. That was it. That smash show. Absolutely. But if you look at the Hulk today as opposed to that show, so there was a lot of things that stretched. And then, of course, the big boom, right? The resurgence of, sci-fi going from crazy costumes that made no sense into the land of Star Wars. And I think Star Wars, in my opinion, redefined how studios could present high-end, well-quality made sci-fi movies and shows. And I mean that in a good way, to the storytelling that we get today in 2025 with the graphics, the animation, the stories, and they're taking it. So this is why the iConis podcast got made, carried on, and this is how we're going forward. And I just want to give you some insight on that. So thank you so much, everyone, for kind of tuning in and being on this journey with us. I hope this gives you a little bit more insight into why we do what we do and why I do it. That's for sure. And definitely, I make this channel more, I guess, it follows a variety channel, right? So there's shorts on there, there's long versions, there's these short videos that we're doing. I know I'm kind of building up to kind of start, doing some online gaming. So I did get my Grandizer video game. I have the Hitman series, and I have a lot of older games. So I have a Dreamcast still here functioning. I got a Panasonic 3DO. I got other PlayStation stuff. So I want to get into that and hook it up nice and start going through. So hopefully before this year is over, I know it's been a little bit longer, but it's been taking me a while to kind of get it together. That is something I want to get into and share that with you as I go on. So the channel is just going to grow as it is. And hopefully in the future, we're going to have more guests on. I'm going to get into maybe talking to more people. We're always open to have guests on the show, maybe getting some live streaming once in a while, just not even video game, but just streaming. And of course, toys. You've seen me doing some of the unboxings, and those are just bringing back some great memories. So that's another why. Why do this or why collect it? I'm not making, no one's sponsoring us, and hopefully someday someone will, but it's because it brings back memories. It brings back memories for me, not to say that I'm stuck in the past, but those were good memories for me. It's also the fact that it's now more accepted than it was when I was growing up. So it's just kind of reopening Pandora's box to share that joy with you. And if someone gets inspired to do a channel, do a podcast, or I don't know, or more than that, then great. And if it doesn't, at least you watch a show, we have a good laugh and we have a good time because it's all about making it a feel-good experience. So this is why the iConis podcast exists. This is why I've turned around and passionate about it. And this is why I keep pushing at it all the time. And I really appreciate everyone for jumping on and supporting us as much as you had. Remember, like, subscribe, and share. Don't let the show be a secret. And this whole world literally was created by a pencil, a piece of paper, and lots of imagination. Keep on dreaming. I'm out. Now, where'd I put my ninja sword?